Hey everyone, my name is Tyler, aka Spartan Snyder, and in this week's video we are discussing the lore of Halo 2. This is a continuation from last week's video, where we discussed the events that took place from Halo Combat Evolved to Halo 2. This was the September anomaly. I have that linked if you want to go take a look at it, see where the red arrows are pointing. We ended that video by talking about the UNSC Gettysburg escaping a Covenant attack and heading back to Earth to warn of an impending invasion. This is where we actually pick up in Halo 2. October 20th, 2552. The Master Chief is actually aboard Cairo Station getting outfitted with the Mjolnir Mark 6 armor. At the same time, the Covenant have actually sentenced the fleet commander of Particular Justice, Velvatum, to death. He will later become the Orbiter. See, the Master Chief and Sergeant Major Johnson, who were aboard the Gettysburg, are actually being recognized at a ceremony aboard Cairo Station, as well as Captain Keyes, and his award is actually being given to his daughter, Lieutenant Commander Miranda Keyes, for their heroism with what occurred on Alpha Halo. Now, this is where the Battle of Earth begins. You see, this attack that the UNSC Gettysburg was warning of is the attack we see in Halo 2. This is where the High Prophet of Regret's fleet arrives at Earth. Funny thing is he's actually not expecting any humans to be present on Earth, which seems weird because Earth is the homeworld for humanity. However, the Covenant had no idea that this was the homeworld for humanity. And so the fleet that Regret brings is surprisingly small. And so his Covenant force is completely outnumbered and outgunned. So that should have been an easy fight. However, the Covenant are smart, and they do have some pretty good technology. You see, they actually implant antimatter charges on the various other stations around Earth, and they start destroying them from inside themselves. The Master Chief is actually able to disarm the antimatter charge that's aboard Cairo Station, and he gives this antimatter charge back to the Covenant in a very phenomenal fashion.
Just one question. What if you miss?
I won't.
However, because some of these stations are destroyed, the High Prophet of Regret's assault carrier is able to break through and down into the orbit above New Mombasa. This is where he initiates a ground assault, and now the UNSC is forced to deploy soldiers into New Mombasa to fight the Covenant and try to repel the invasion. The Master Chief, after returning the antimatter charge to the Covenant and destroying another carrier, lands aboard the UNSC and Amber Clan, and they deploy down into New Mombasa and attempt a ground assault to repel the Covenant invasion. However, once the Prophet of Regret knew he was completely outnumbered and outgunned and that he could no longer hold his position in New Mombasa, he makes an emergency slip space jump inside the atmosphere of Earth. And this is dangerous because this emits a lot of radiation, and it actually causes a massive explosion on New Mombasa, which almost destroyed the city. The UNSC and Amberclad with the Master Chief aboard is actually able to follow Regret's assault carrier through its slipspace portal, and they were able to escape the explosion. However, they spend almost 2 weeks inside slipspace, and they have no idea where they're going. However, the fight's not over, because right after Regret makes his emergency slipspace jump, he is reinforced by Brute-led Covenant occupation forces, and they actually are able to be inserted into New Mombasa, and they're able to take the city. During this whole invasion of Earth, this is where Thel 'Vadam becomes the Arbiter at the request of the High Prophet's Truth and Mercy. You see, he was sentenced to death, and becoming the Arbiter is a death sentence because they are sent on suicide missions. They are expected to serve in the capacity of Arbiter until the day they die, which usually occurs in combat. The Arbiter is then immediately sent to destroy a band of heretics who broke away from the Covenant because they no longer believed in what the Covenant was about, to recover the Oracle, who turns out just to be 343 Guilty Spark from Alpha Halo. The next day is actually when the Battle of New Mombasa ends. This is October 21st. This ends with a Covenant victory. In the dawn, Covenant reinforcements sent by the Prophet of Truth arrive at Earth, and they start uncovering some sort of portal that's buried under the Earth there. And this is where we see that Earth is actually glassed by the Covenant fleet. Now, if you don't know what glassing is when the Covenant take a giant stream of plasma and they drop it onto the ground, turning its surface into glass. As I said earlier, the UNSC and Amberclad spent 2 weeks in slipspace with the Covenant. Now, they exit slipspace not knowing where they are, and they are greeted by the sight of another Halo. This is Delta Halo, Installation 05. The UNSC and Amberclad follows the High Prophet of Regret's assault carrier down to the ring, and they actually are able to land on the ring and assault a Forerunner structure that the High Prophet has taken refuge in. This is where the Master Chief, aided by ODSTs and Marines, attempts to assassinate the High Prophet, and he's successful. However, it comes at a cost, because once the High Prophet is assassinated, there is an orbital bombardment from the fleet in orbit of the ring, and they destroy the Forerunner temple that the Master Chief was in, trying to kill him because he has done a lot of damage to the Covenant, especially with destroying Alpha Halo and now killing a High Prophet. They're unsuccessful. No one's surprised by this. The Master Chief is actually thrown into a lake, and he is captured by the Gravemind. Now, the Gravemind is a conglomerate of Flood. This is almost like a hive AI sort of mind that's a hyper-intelligent being of Flood biomass. It controls all of the Flood in its area or in its domain. The Orbiter, after successfully retrieving the Oracle, 343 Guilty Spark, is then sent to Delta Halo to retrieve the installation's activation index. The Arbiter is successful in retrieving the activation index. However, he is betrayed by Tartarus, who is the Brute Chieftain. See, Tartarus had orders from the High Prophets to kill the Arbiter once his mission was complete. However, the Arbiter actually doesn't die. He is thrown into the depths of the ring world, but is captured by the Gravemind. The Gravemind then convinces the Master Chief and Orbiter that the only way to save the universe from being destroyed by the Halo is to secure the activation index and the control room. This is when Master Chief is teleported to High Charity to retrieve the activation index, and the Arbiter is teleported as close to the control room as possible so that they can attempt to secure their individual pieces. They're both aided by the chaos from the Covenant Civil War. However, the Master Chief is unable to prevent the Index from leaving High Charity. Master Chief, at the advice of Cortana, stows away aboard the Forerunner Dreadnought that is launching from High Charity. Cortana actually remains behind to ensure the destruction of Installation 05 should it be necessary. Cortana is able to send a slipspace message back to Earth telling them that Master Chief is en route aboard a Forerunner Dreadnought, and it kind of gives them a heads up of the situation of what's going on. The Orbiter, in the meantime, is able to reach the control room, but is unable to prevent Tartarus from activating the ring. However, with the help from the UNSC and the Elites, as well as the Arbor, are able to kill Tartarus, and this allows Commander Miranda Keyes to physically remove the index from the core, which temporarily interrupts the firing sequence. However, due to the interruption, Installation 05 automatically sends a signal to all other Forerunner installations in the galaxy, activating them and placing them in standby mode. The Elites that are now allied with humanity, they use their plasma-based weapons aboard their ship to glass the surface of the ring in order to contain the flood infestation so it can't spread and start consuming the humans and the Elites alike. On November 8th, the Prophet of Truth arrives in the Sol system. This is our solar system that houses Earth. He is aboard the Forerunner Dreadnought, as we've stated before, and he's actually proceeding directly to Earth at a very, very rapid speed. This is where Halo 2 ends, and there's actually a little bit of events that take place in the interim while the Forerunner Dreadnought is in slipspace en route to Earth, and we're going to cover that in next week's video. So, with that said, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, leave a like, get subscribed, hit that bell icon, and I hope to see you next week when we discuss the events that take place in between Halo 2 and Halo 3. Y'all take care, and I'll see you next time.
We've got a new contact, unknown classification.
It isn't one of ours. Take it out.
This is Spartan 117.
Anyone hear me? Over.
Isolate that signal. Master Chief, you mind telling me what you're doing on that ship?
Sir, finishing this fight.